Clara Bell, the orphan cook everyone in Mercy Crossing called unwanted, burst from the teacherage door before sunrise with smoke in her hair, blood on her knuckles, and a half-burned D pressed under her apron like a stolen heart. Behind her, the schoolhouse bell clanged though no child had pulled the rope, and Judge Harlan Voss shouted that she had set the fire to hide her father's shame. Clara knew the truth could save her or hang her, because the same deed had disappeared once before, the night her parents died, and the town decided an orphan girl's memory was worth nothing. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. Leave your country name in the comments below. And if you love stories about courage, loyalty, and community, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. By the time the sun broke thin and red over Mercy Crossing, the whole town had found a reason to stand outside the blackened teacherage. Women in shawls gathered near the boardwalk, whispering with hands pressed to their mouths. Men came from the livery, the mercantile, the sheriff's office, and the saloon, their boots dark with dew and ash. The schoolhouse stood beside the teacherage like an old widow in mourning, its whitewashed walls stained gray where smoke had crawled along the roofline. The little porch where children used to leave lunch pails was scattered with charred papers, broken slate, and one tin cup that had rolled into the dirt. Clara Bell stood in the road with her apron burned through at the pocket and her right sleeve torn from elbow to wrist. No one stepped close to her. She was 24, slight from years of hard work, with hair the color of burnt honey, pulled loose by the night's terror. Folks knew her as the cook at the Union House, the girl who rose before every teamster and slept after every drunk had stumbled upstairs. She made biscuits, washed sheets, hauled water, mended curtains, and never sat at the front pew on Sunday, because Mrs. Pike said hired girls with uncertain parentage ought not pretend at respectability. Clara had learned long ago that hunger could be survived, cold could be endured, and loneliness could be folded small enough to hide beneath a work dress. But public shame had a sound. It was the hush that came when she turned her head. It was the quick cough of a man who knew better than to defend her. It was the soft, eager rustle of women leaning toward scandal. Judge Harlan Voss stood near the teacherage steps with soot on his fine black coat. He was tall and silver-haired, with a watch chain shining across his vest as if even fire respected his dignity. Beside him, his son Wade Voss held a bucket and wore an expression too calm for a man who claimed to have fought flames. "There she is," the judge said, raising his voice just enough for everyone to hear. "Caught running from Miss Ruth Alden's rooms before dawn. Fire in the stove, papers burning on the floor, and not a word of explanation." Clara's throat tightened. "I did not set that fire." "Then what were you doing there?" Mrs. Pike demanded from the edge of the crowd. "A cook has no business in the teacherage at that hour." "She sent for me," Clara said. The lie was not in the words. Miss Ruth Alden had sent for her. The old school teacher had slipped a folded note under Clara's kitchen door the night before, written in a hand shaky from fever. "Come before sunrise. There is something in the flu. Do not let Voss see." But Miss Ruth was not there to say it. She lay in the doctor's back room, carried out coughing and faint while the fire still spat from the teacherage stove. Judge Voss lifted one gray brow. Miss Alden was ill with laudanum and fever. Convenient that she cannot speak for herself. Clara pressed her burned hand against her apron. Under the cloth, hidden flat against her ribs, was the thing she had found inside the broken stove flue. A deed, scorched along two edges, its seals blistered, its ink faded but not gone. Her father's name remained clear, Silas Bell, the name that still made men in town look away, the name they had put on a pauper's stone after the sawmill fire 17 years before. The name they said belonged to a drunk, a debtor, a liar who had tried to claim land already promised to better men. Clara had been 7 when her parents died. She remembered smoke, She remembered her mother screaming. She remembered Judge Voss kneeling before her afterward, his hand heavy on her shoulder, telling her she must not fill her head with dreams about land and papers because poor men often imagine what they could not own. Now the paper existed, and every eye in Mercy Crossing watched her as if she were the fire. Sheriff Tom Brindle pushed through the crowd, older and rounder than his badge wanted him to be. "Clara, you best come with me until we sort this." "I did nothing." "Then sorting won't hurt you." The judge smiled faintly. Clara looked toward the boarding house porch, hoping Mrs. Donnelly, who owned the Union House, might speak. The woman stood with her arms folded tight, face pale, already calculating what scandal would do to breakfast trade. A horse snorted at the far end of the street. Caleb Mercer rode in from the East Road with prairie dust on his coat and the sunrise behind him. He was not a man who arrived loudly. He owned 3 Pines Ranch 6 miles outside town, a spread of grass, creek bottom, and weathered barns that had once belonged to his grandfather. Folks called him steady, quiet, unlucky. 3 years before, his fiancée had died of lung fever 2 weeks before their wedding, and Caleb had folded into himself like a letter never sent. He drew in near the schoolyard gate, eyes moving from the burned teacherage to Clara's torn sleeve. The crowd made room because Mercer still had a name, even if their money had thinned. "What happened?" he asked. Judge Voss answered before anyone else could. "An unfortunate matter. Miss Bell was found fleeing the teacherage with evidence destroyed." Caleb looked at Clara. "Were you fleeing the fire or the men behind you?" A murmur passed through the crowd. Clara's eyes stung. Not from smoke this time. No one had asked the question that way. Wade Voss stepped forward. "Careful, Mercer. You came for a school board meeting, not to insult your betters." "I came because Miss Alden sent word last week about repairs to the school roof," Caleb said. "And because I saw smoke from the ridge." Judge Voss asked a year. "Gee." Judge Voss' expression hardened almost too quickly to notice. "Then help us by staying out of a lawful inquiry." Caleb dismounted. His boots hit the dirt with a soft, final sound. He crossed to Clara, but stopped short enough not to frighten her. His gaze fell to the burn on her hand. "You need a doctor. She needs a cell," Wade said. "She needs water and bandage," Caleb replied. "If the sheriff wants to question her, he can question her where Doc Avery can see that hand." The sheriff rubbed his jaw. He had never been brave in the face of Judge Voss, but neither did he like the sight of Clara bleeding in the road while half the town fed on it. "Dosie's office first," he said at last. Clara's knees nearly gave way, but she forced them firm. As Caleb turned to walk beside her, Judge Voss leaned close enough for only her to hear. "Whatever you took from that stove," he murmured, "will be ash by sundown. Like it should have been before." Clara did not answer. She fixed her eyes on the doctor's door across the street and held the burned deed against her heart as though paper could feel fear. Doc Avery's office smelled of carbolic coffee and wet wool. Clara sat on a stool by the window while the doctor cleaned her hand. The pain was sharp enough to make black spots swim before her eyes, but she bit down on the inside of her cheek and kept silent. She had learned silence in kitchen, silence in church, silence when men like Wade Voss came too near the pantry door and laughed if she stepped back. Caleb stood near the stove, hat in hand. The sheriff waited by the cabinet. Outside, the crowd had not dispersed. Their shadows moved across the frosted glass. Doc Avery wrapped Clara's fingers in linen. These burns came from reaching into heat, not starting it. Judge Voss, who had entered without invitation, gave a dry laugh. "A hand can be burned after the mischief is done." She breathed smoke, the doctor said. "Go to us under the nails from pulling brick or iron." Someone tried to retrieve something. The room went still. Clara felt the deed under her apron, like a living coal. Judge Voss's eyes narrowed. Retrieve what? Doc Avery glanced at Clara, then Caleb, then the sheriff. That is not for me to say. I meant flesh, not motives. Wade Voss leaned against the doorframe. Search her. The word struck Clara harder than a slap. No, Caleb said. Wade smiled. No, you will not put hands on her. Sheriff Brindle shifted uneasily. Caleb, if she's carrying evidence, then have Mrs. Avery search her proper with you waiting outside. Unless this town has forgotten every decent rule it claims to defend. Clara looked at Caleb then, not with gratitude, not yet. Gratitude required trust, and trust was a luxury she had never been able to afford. But she looked. Judge Voss studied them both. This is an odd hill to stand on, Mercer. Your father had trouble enough over the Bell claim years ago. Caleb's mouth tightened. My father is buried. Leave him out of it, gladly. Though you should remember what that family costs yours. Clara flinched. Caleb saw it. He looked back at the judge. I remember grown men blaming a child. For the first time that morning, Judge Voss' face lost its smoothness. Mrs. Avery came from the back room, a stout woman with silver spectacles and a no-nonsense chin. At the sheriff's request, she took Clara behind a curtain. Clara's breath trembled as she drew the burned deed from beneath her apron. Mrs. Avery's eyes widened. Lord preserve us. Please, Clara whispered. No, not give it to him, T.O. Not give it to him, T.O. Who? But Clara's silence answered. Mrs. Avery wrapped the deed inside a clean towel, then tucked it beneath a stack of bandages in her sewing basket. When they stepped out, she faced the men with a basket on one arm, and a look that had ended many arguments in that office. She has no weapon and no stolen valuables, Mrs. Avery said. What about papers? Wade snapped. I said what I said. Judge Voss' gaze rested on the basket. Mrs. Avery, obstruction of inquiry. Judge, she interrupted. My husband has treated every fever, fracture, childbirth, bullet wound, and toothache in this town for 19 years. Threatened me in my own rooms, and you might find mercy crossing, suddenly short of mercy. A sound moved through the waiting crowd outside. Part shock, part delight. Caleb almost smiled. The sheriff cleared his throat. Clara, until Miss Alden wakes, I need to know where you'll be. Mrs. Donnelly says the Union House can't take you back while this is hanging. Clara's face burned worse than her hand. Of course, a cook accused of arson was bad for business. A cook with no family was easy to cast out. She can stay at 3 Pines, Caleb said. Every head turned. Clara stared at him. No, he lowered his voice. There's an empty room off the kitchen. Mrs. Vale keeps house for me 3 days a week. You'll not be alone with me. I cannot owe you. You want. You can cook for the hands while your hand mends if Doc allows it. Judge Voss gave a soft, dangerous laugh. How noble. Taking in an accused woman tied to a burned deed that might challenge half the Eastern Valley. Clara's heart stopped. Caleb heard it too. I never said deed. The room held its breath. Wade's jaw clenched. Judge Voss recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. I assume? The judge said. The Bells were always chasing these. Caleb stepped toward the doctor's table, slow and controlled. What deed, Harlan? Ghost paper, the judge said. A fancy Silas Bell spread before his death. He claimed Cottonwood Bend, though the bank records proved otherwise. My father said Silas Bell was cheated, Caleb replied. Clara looked at him sharply. Caleb did not look away from the judge. Then my father went quiet and yours prospered. The sheriff lifted both hands. Enough. We're not trying a 17-year-old land quarrel in Dossier's office. No, you. Judge Voss said, hat brim casting a shadow over his eyes. We are trying a fire set this morning by a woman with every reason to destroy evidence. Clara stood so fast the stool scraped the floor. I ran because someone was inside after me. The words came out before fear could stop them. Caleb turned. Who? I didn't see his face. I heard boots in Miss Alden's sitting room. He shoved the stove door open. I had the paper all ready. Then fire caught the rug. I hit him with the poker and ran. Wade touched his temple without thinking. A small red swelling marked the hairline. Caleb saw. So did the sheriff. Judge Voss moved between them. My son helped carry water. Then, he will not mind showing where he got that bruise, Caleb said. Wade's hand dropped from a beam. There were no fallen beams, Doc Avery said quietly. For once, Sheriff Brindle's badge seemed to weigh enough to straighten him. Wade, I need a word. Judge Voss's voice turned cold. You will need evidence. Caleb looked at Clara. She understood then that the burn deed could not stay hidden forever. But if she revealed it in that room, Voss might claim it, destroy it, or twist it before she knew what it proved. Caleb must have read the fear in her face. Evidence can be secured, he said. AAT seat with witnesses. The judge smiled. The county seat is 40 miles by rough road, and the bridge at Elk Wash is still out from last week's storm. Then, we ride by the North Trail. You, Wade sneered. For her. Caleb's reply was quiet enough that only the closest heard. For the truth, that afternoon, Clara left Mercy Crossing in the back of Caleb Mercer's buckboard with Miss S. Avery's sewing basket at her feet, a borrowed shawl around her shoulders, and the town's judgment following like dust. Three Pines Ranch lay beyond rolling prairie, where buffalo grass moved in silver sheets under the wind. The road past cottonwoods, creek beds, and old fence lines half swallowed by sage. Clara had ridden that way only twice in her life, both times in the boarding house wagon, to cook for harvest crews. She remembered the Mercer place as broad and lonely, with three tall pines by the house that had no business growing so proud on open land. By dusk, the ranch appeared beneath a sky bruised purple with rain. Lanterns glowed in the barn. A windmill creaked. Horses lifted their heads along a corral fence, ears pricked towards strangers. Mrs. Agnes Vale met them at the kitchen door with a rifle in her hands and flour on one cheek. So this is the girl who burned the school, stole a deed, bewitched the sheriff, and ruined breakfast at the Union House before 9 o'clock, she said. Clara froze. Mrs. Vale lowered the rifle and opened the door wider. Well, coming before you add catching pneumonia to the lists. Caleb helped Clara down from the wagon, but did not touch her longer than necessary. That mattered. He carried the sewing basket himself, placing it on the kitchen table beneath the lamplight. Mrs. Vale unwrapped the deed. No one spoke. The paper was thick, browned by heat, curled at the corners. One seal was cracked. A strip along the lower right had burned away, taking part of a witness signature with it. But the center remained legible. Territorial Land Grant. Cottonwood Ben, Silas Bell, and Mary Ann Bell. Paid in full. Recorded at Mercy Crossing. Year 1865. Clara gripped the back of a chair. My mother's name, she whispered. Caleb leaned over the paper. Cottonwood Ben touches my south pasture, Mrs. Vale crossed herself. And Voss claimed it for the railroad spur last winter. Not claim, Caleb said. Bought from the bank. What bank? Clara asked. Caleb looked at her, and something like shame moved through his face. The note on Three Pines is held by Voss Bank. He said the Ben had been abandoned since Silas died, and no heir came forward. He offered me grazing rights if I agreed not to contest the spur row. Clara's voice was small. So my land was used to bargain with you. I did not know it was yours. But you believe my father cheated yours. He took the words without defense. I believed what angry men said when I was 15. My father and Silas Bell argued over a boundary fence. After the fire, my father drank harder and said less. I never asked enough. Clara wanted to hate him for that. It would have been easier than feeling the ache in his honesty. Mrs. Vale set a pot on the stove with a firm clang. "Tonight we eat. Tomorrow we decide which hornet nests to kick." Life at Three Pines did not pause for scandal. Before dawn, Clara woke to the sound of rain tapping the roof and men moving in the yard. She tried to rise from the narrow bed in the kitchen room, but pain flashed through her bandaged hand. On the chair beside her lay a clean work dress, plain blue, mended at the cuffs. Someone had set a basin of warm water near the stove. In the kitchen, Caleb was making coffee badly. He looked up, caught with grounds spilled across the table. Mrs. Vale left before sunup to tend her sister. "I thought I could manage." Clara surveyed the mess. "You thought wrong." A corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile but close enough to change his face. She stepped past him and began working one-handed. He reached for the flour barrel. She stopped him. "Not that. Cornmeal first. Hands have to eat quick. If they're moving cattle in rain, you should be resting." "Sue, I have rested enough in this life to know it doesn't feed anybody." He obeyed her instructions, awkwardly at first, then with careful attention. He stirred when she told him. Fetch salt pork, sliced apples, pumped water, and burned only one pan before she took it from him with a sigh. When the ranch hands came in, wet hats dripping, they stopped at the sight of Clara by the stove. Three men looked at Caleb. One looked at the floor. The oldest, a bow-legged cowhand named Amos, removed his hat. "Ma." Clara had been called girl, orphan, cook, trouble, and worse. Ma'am struck her so gently she nearly dropped the spoon. By noon, she had learned the rhythm of the ranch: horses to feed, harness to mend, calves to check, water troughs to clear of mud. Caleb did not command with bluster. He spoke low, worked harder than any hired hand, and listened to animals as if they spoke back. When a bay mare refused grain, he noticed before anyone else. When a young hen cursed at a tangled line, Caleb took the rope and showed him again without shame. Clara watched from the porch, her burned hand held close, and felt something dangerous. Peace, not safety. Safety was a locked door and a loaded rifle. Peace was the smell of wet hay, coffee warming on the stove, and a man who did not ask her questions only to use the answers against her. The first letter surfaced that evening. It was tucked inside the deed, fused slightly to the back where heat had softened the wax. Caleb warmed it over steam while Clara held her breath. The paper loosened. The ink had run in places, but Miss Ruth Alden's hand was still readable. "Clara, if I am too late, forgive me. Your mother gave me the deed the night of the sawmill fire. She feared Harlan Voss would take it. I hid it in the teacherage flue, because no man in this town ever thought a school teacher's room's worth searching. I was a coward for keeping silent. There were letters, too. One went to the county recorder, one to Caleb Mercer's father, one to you when you became of age. All vanished from my desk before I could send them. I believe Voss took them. The deed alone might not be enough unless the county copy remains." Clara stopped reading. Caleb stood across from her, lamplight making his eyes darker. "There was a letter to my father. That's what she wrote. My father died thinking he had failed to prove something. And I grew up thinking mine was a liar." Rain struck the windows harder. Caleb sat down slowly. Then we both inherited silence. The words stayed between them. The next day, Clara insisted on helping with small work. She could not lift heavy pots, but she could season stew, knead dough with her left hand and right wrist, count supplies, and stitch torn grain sacks. In the afternoon, a calf went missing near the creek, and she saw one of the younger hands ride back without it, claiming the mud was too deep. Clara took a lantern and walked out before anyone noticed. Caleb found her at the creek bend at twilight, skirts muddy to the knee, kneeling beside the calf caught in a tangle of willow roots. She had looped her shawl under its belly and was trying to keep its nose above the rising water. "Clara, it'll drown if we wait." He slid down the bank, water soaking his boots. Together, they freed the calf, Caleb cutting roots while Clara held the trembling body steady. The calf kicked once, striking her burned hand. She gasped but did not let go. When it was done, Caleb carried the calf up the bank and set it in the grass. Clara followed, shivering. "That was foolish," he said, but his voice shook. You could have been swept under." "Yeah, why?" She looked at the calf staggering toward its bawling mother. "Because I know what it is to cry where no one thinks to look." Caleb's anger left him. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. For a moment they stood close in the rain. His hands hovered near her arms, careful, asking without asking. She let him hold the coat in place. It was the smallest permission, but both of them felt its weight. He walked her back slowly. That night, he did not speak of feelings. He heated bricks for her feet, changed the bandage on her hand with clumsy tenderness, and set Miss Ruth's letter inside a tin box where mice and men could not easily reach it. Trust came like that, not as a declaration, but as bread shared before dawn, a coat in rain, a lamp left burning outside her door. 3 days later, trouble rode under a clear sky. Wade Voss came with 2 men Clara did not know and a paper signed by his father. They stopped at the ranch gate while Caleb and Amos were repairing a broken wagon tongue. Clara watched from the kitchen window, flour on her wrists and dread tightening her chest. Wade lifted the paper. Sheriff's order. Search for stolen county records. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag. "Where's the sheriff?" "Busy." "Then your paper is nothing but your father's ink." One of the men shifted his coat, showing the butt of a pistol. Amos spat into the dust. "That ain't how neighbors visit." Wade's eyes moved to the house. He saw Clara in the window and smiled. She stepped back too late. "You're sheltering a fugitive," he called. "Judge says any man aiding her might find his banknote due in full." Caleb did not move, but Clara saw the blow land. 3 Pines was not rich. The fences sagged in places. The barn roof needed shingles. The Mercer name still stood tall, but weather and debt had eaten beneath it. Voss held the note. Voss could ruin him. Clara came onto the porch. Caleb turned sharply. "Go inside." "No," her voice carried across the yard. "I will not hide while he prices your courage." Wade laughed. "Listen to her. A boarding house cook talks like a lady because she slept 1 week under a Mercer roof." Clara descended 1 step. "I was born on land your father stole." The yard went silent. Wade's face changed. "Careful." "No, I've been careful all my life. Careful not to speak when women pinched pennies from my wages. Careful not to cry when children asked why no one claimed me. Careful not to remember fire because men told me memory was sin. I am done being careful for your comfort." Wade swung down from his horse. Caleb moved between them. "Mount up." Wade's voice dropped. "Give me the paper, and maybe father lets you keep your ranch through winter." Clara realized then that Wade was more afraid of the deed than any court would be. He had searched the teacherage, he had struck the match, and if he did not get the deed back, something greater than Clara's shame would burn. "It's not here," she said. That was true enough. The deed and letter had gone that morning with Mrs. Avery's cousin, hidden beneath jars of preserves bound for the county seat by freight wagon. Caleb had planned it without telling Clara until after, fearing she would insist on carrying it herself. Wade looked at Caleb. "You think a county clerk will stand against my father?" "I think paper travels faster when men don't know which wagon carries it," Caleb said. One of Wade's riders cursed. Wade smiled again, but all charm had left it. "Winter is long, Mercer." They rode off in a scatter of dust. That night, the barn burned. The alarm came near midnight when horses screamed. An orange light filled Clara's window. She ran barefoot into the yard as men shouted and hauled buckets from the well. Flames crawl along the high loft, reedy and bright. Caleb was already inside, cutting horses loose. Clara grabbed a wet blanket and flung toward the smoke. Amos caught her. "No, Mom, my room faces the yard. I saw a man by the north wall." "Who?" She looked past him and saw, beyond the firelight, a rider on a pale horse at the ridge. "Wait." Caleb emerged, dragging the bay mare by the halter, coughing. His shirt blackened. A beam cracked overhead. Men shouted for him to get back, but he turned again toward the barn. "The stallion," Amos yelled. "Leave him." Caleb did not. Clara tore free and ran to the side pen. The prized black stallion, Resolute, was trapped against the fence, wild with fear. Clara seized the gate latch, but it had jammed. Heat pressed against her face. She took a fence rail with both hands. Pain burst through her burn, white and blinding. But she slammed the rail against the latch once, twice, 3 times. The gate flew open. Resolute charged out, knocking her into the mud. Caleb reached her just as sparks rained down. He lifted her with one arm and half-carried her clear. Behind them, part of the barn roof collapsed with a roar that shook the ground. By dawn, half the barn was gone. No one spoke much. Men stood in ash, faces hollow. Tack, hay, tools, winter stores, so much had burned. Resolute lived. The horses lived. But survival did not pay banknotes. Caleb sat on a stump near the ruins, head bowed, hands hanging between his knees. Clara approached with coffee. Her bandage had bled through. "This is because of me," she said. He took the cup but did not drink. "This is because of Voss and Einer. You cannot lose 3 pines for a deed that might not even hold." Caleb looked up then. The grief in his face was not for the barn alone. It was for years of holding a place together with duty, only to watch another man's greed strike a match. "My grandfather planted those pines with a coffee tin and a prayer," he said. "My father nearly drank this ranch into dust after your parents died. I spent 12 years bringing it back. I know what this place costs. Then do not throw it after me. I am not throwing it away." His voice roughened. "I am deciding what it is worth." Clara had no answer. At noon, Sheriff Brindle arrived, hat in hand. He looked at the burned barn and aged 5 years in a breath. "I came to warn you," he said. "Judge Voss filed petition to seize the Bell deed as fraudulent and charge Clara with arson at the teacherage. He also called Caleb's note due." Clara closed her eyes. Caleb nodded once as if he had expected the blow. "How long?" 10 days before foreclosure. "Less if he pushes." "And Clara?" The sheriff swallowed. "He wants her in custody tomorrow." Caleb stood. "Then tomorrow we ride to town." Clara stared at him. "No, yes. He wants that. He wants me where he can take the deed. The deed is already on the road. And if the wagon is stopped," Caleb's silence answered. By evening they knew the preserves wagon had never reached the county seat. Mrs. Avery's cousin was found beside the North Trail with a broken collarbone and no memory beyond masked men riding out of the cottonwoods. The jars were smashed, the sewing basket gone. Clara sat alone in the kitchen after the news, the room around her blurred by lamplight. The deed had vanished again, just as the title of her life had promised. But Miss Ruth's letter remained. Caleb had kept it in the tin box. It proved intent, perhaps, but not ownership. Not enough to stop Voss, not enough to restore her parents' name. Caleb came in quietly. "Clara." She laughed once, broken and bitter. "I ran from the teacherage door before sunrise like a fool, thinking if I held tight enough, truth could not be taken. But truth is only paper when rich men own the matches." He sat across from her. "Truth is also witness. Witnesses die. They forget. They get afraid." "Ah, yes," she looked at him. "Are you afraid?" He did not answer quickly. That made her believe the answer when it came. Yes, the honesty undid her more than bravery would have. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. I am afraid of losing the ranch, afraid the hands will suffer for standing with me, afraid I'll fail you the way my father failed yours, afraid you'll run, because running has kept you alive. Her eyes filled. It has, I know. His voice gentle, but staying might save more than you. Clara wanted to reach for him. She did not know how, so she placed her bandaged hand on the table between them. Caleb looked at it, then laid his hand beside hers, not touching, waiting. She turned her fingers just enough to rest against his. No vow had ever sounded louder. The sacrifice began before dawn. Caleb rode to the east pasture and brought in Resolute, the black stallion his father had bred and his grandfather had dreamed of. Men from 3 counties had tried to buy that horse. Caleb had refused every offer. Resolute was not merely money. He was future Colt's future strength, the pride of a ranch that had little else to boast. At breakfast, Amos saw the saddle on Resolute and put down his coffee. No, the old hand said. Caleb tightened the cinch. There's a buyer at Fort Laramie who offered $800 last spring. I can get my B6 now if I ride hard. That horse is 3 pines. Caleb looked toward the kitchen window where Clara stood unseen behind the curtain. No, he is a horse, a fine one, but still a horse. Clara stepped out. You cannot sell him for me. I am selling him for time. Time for what, Tito? Pay enough on the note that Voss cannot seize the ranch before the county hearing. To hire a lawyer not frightened of him. To put notices in every town between here and Denver asking after the original county copy. He paused. And to offer a reward for the men who took the wagon. Her chest ached. You love that horse? Yes. Then you will hate me for it someday. Caleb came close, stopping at the porch step below her. Morning light touched the soot still, darkened his hair from the barn fire. Clara, listen to me. I loved a woman once who died before I could build the house I promised her. After that, I thought love was a room shut up and left behind. Then you came here with ash in your hair and more courage than anyone in Mercy Crossing had earned the right to ask of you. You did not make me choose between my peace and your trouble. You showed me my peace was built beside your trouble all along. Tears slipped down her face. He did not ask for an answer. He only mounted Resolute and rode east. Clara watched until horse and rider became one dark mark against the prairie. Then she made her own choice. By noon, she had put on the blue dress, pinned Miss Ruth's letter inside her bodice, and taken the old gray mare from the side corral. Mrs. Vale caught her at the gate. Where do you think you're going? To Mercy Crossing, Caleb said. Caleb is not the only one allowed to be brave. Mrs. Vale's stern face softened with reluctant pride. You ride in there alone. Voss will have you locked before supper. Not if I go where he cannot drag me out quietly. The church bell was ringing for Wednesday prayer when Clara rode into town. Every head turned. It seemed the whole street paused. Merchants, children, draymen, saloon idlers, women with baskets on their arms. Shame rose around her as familiar as dust. But this time she did not bow her head. She tied the mare before the church and walked inside. Reverend Cole stopped mid-scripture. Judge Foss sat in the front pew, his silver hair immaculate. Wade stood near the side, a bruise still yellow at his temple. Sheriff Brindle was at the back, hand near his belt, misery in his eyes. Clara walked to the center aisle. I have come to speak before witnesses, Judge Foss rose. This is a house of worship, not a courtroom. Then worship truth. Guests moved like wind through wheat. Clara drew Miss Ruth's letter from her dress. This was written by Miss Ruth Alden before the teacherage burned. She hid my parents' deed because she feared Holland Voss. She wrote that letters vanished from her desk. She wrote that one letter was meant for Caleb Mercer's father. She wrote that the county copy might still exist. Voss's voice remained smooth, a fevered woman's rambling, carried by an accused arsonist. Then let Miss Ruth speak. The church doors opened. Doc Avery entered with Miss Ruth Alden on his arm. The old teacher looked like paper folded too many times, pale and thin, but her eyes were clear. Mrs. Avery walked on her other side. Behind them came two school children, solemn as pallbearers, carrying the teacher's chair. They set Miss Ruth at the front. The silence in the church was not gossip now. It was fear turning direction. Miss Ruth lifted one trembling hand. I wrote that letter. Judge Voss's jaw tightened. Ruth, you are unwell. I was unwell for 17 years, she said, voice weak but shocked, sick with cowardice. Clara covered her mouth. Miss Ruth looked at her. Your mother came to me the night the sawmill burned. She had soot on her dress and blood at her hairline. She said Voss wanted the bend for the spur road he hoped would come someday. She gave me the deed and begged me to take Clara if she did not live. A sob broke from someone in the pews. I fail, Miss Ruth said. By morning, both your parents were dead. Men said Silas had set the mill fire drunk. I believed speaking would make no difference. Then my desk was searched, my letters gone, and Judge Voss told me children might suffer if the school lost funding. So I hid the deed and taught arithmetic under the same roof as my sin. Judge Voss turned to the congregation. This is madness. The church doors opened again. Caleb Mercer came in covered with trail dust, but he was not alone. Beside him walked a narrow man in a county clerk's coat, spectacles crooked from hard riding. Amos followed with a shotgun. Behind them, two deputy marshals led Wade's hired riders in ropes. Wade went white. Caleb's eyes found Clara first. Relief, fear, anger, love. None of it spoken, all of it there. The county clerk adjusted his spectacles. I am Edwin Preet of the county recorder's office. Mr. Mercer reached me at the North Station last night. Upon review, an original duplicate of the 1865 rent was located in the Territorial Archive box, misfiled under Bell, Marianne, not Bell, Silas. Voss gripped the pew. The clerk unfolded a paper. Cottonwood Bend was deeded to Silas and Marianne Bell, with survivorship to legal heir Clara Bell. No lawful transfer appears in county record. Sheriff Brindle stepped away from the back wall. The clerk continued, voice growing stronger. Furthermore, two men detained at Elk Wash were found carrying Mrs. Avery's sewing basket and a damaged deed matching Miss Bell's description. They have named Wade Voss as the man who paid them. Wade bolted. He made it 3 steps before Amos swung the butt of the shotgun into his middle. Wade dropped hard, knocking over a hymnal stand. No one moved to help him. Judge Voss looked around the church, searching for the old obedience and finding only faces. Sheriff Brindle walked down the aisle. His hand shook, but his voice did not. Harlan Voss, you are under arrest pending charges of fraud, intimidation, theft of records, and conspiracy to commit arson. For a moment, Judge Voss seemed unable to understand a world in which his name did not shield him. Then he looked at Clara with such hatred that Caleb stepped between them. But Clara touched Caleb's sleeve. No, she whispered. Let him see me. Caleb moved aside. Clara faced the judge. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every pew. You told a 7-year-old girl her memory was worthless. You told the town my father was a liar. You let my mother's name turn to ash. But you did not count on a school teacher's guilt, a doctor's wife's basket, a rancher's stubborn heart, or an orphan who learned to run fast enough to keep the truth alive. Judge Voss said nothing as the sheriff took him away. In the days that followed, Mercy Crossing changed slowly, the way winter loosens from the ground. No bell rang for an instant miracle. No gossip vanished in a single Sunday. Some people apologized to Clara with tears. Some avoided her because shame, when returned to its owner, is an uncomfortable burden. Mrs. Pike brought a pie to Three Pines and said only, "I was mistaken," as if the words had thorns. Clara accepted the pie but not the old place assigned to her. The court restored Cottonwood Bend to Clara. The railroad spur was halted pending inquiry. Voss Bank passed into receivership after hidden ledgers came to light, and Caleb's note was bought by a cattle association at fair terms. Wade and the hired men were taken under guard to the county seat. Judge Voss, stripped of title and polish, waited for a trial in the same cell he had wanted for Clara. Caleb returned from Fort Laramie without resolute. Clara met him by the burned barn. He looked exhausted, his hat dusty, his shoulders heavy from more than the ride. "I sold him," he said. "I know. I got enough to cover the note until the bank matter settled. Then Pritt told me the receivership would have stopped foreclosure anyway." He tried to smile and failed. "Sold the finest horse in the county for a time. We ended up not needing." Clara stepped close. "We needed it when you gave it. That does not bring him back." No. She reached for his hand. This time she did not stop at the edge of touch. She held it. "But Cottonwood Bend has grass enough for a breeding pasture, and I know a woman who owns it, who might be persuaded to partner with a stubborn rancher." He looked at her then, really looked, as if hope were a thing he distrusted but could not refuse. "A partner, I have had practice." They rebuilt the barn before the first snow. Men came from ranches that had once stayed silent. Women brought nails, quilts, coffee, and opinions. Children carried kindling and asked Clara if it was true she had hit an arsonist with a stove poker. Miss Ruth, recovering under Mrs. Avery's command, sat in a chair near the schoolhouse window and wrote out the full account of what she had hidden, signing every page with a steadier hand. Clara used part of the court settlement to repair the teacherage, not because she wanted to live in the place where fear had nearly swallowed her, but because she refused to leave it as a monument to silence. The stove was replaced. The burned floorboards were sanded. The porch rail was rebuilt, smooth enough for children's hands. Above the mantel, she hung a frame containing three things: Miss Ruth's letter, the county copy of the deed, and the blackened scraps she had carried under her apron before sunrise. On the morning the teacherage reopened, the town gathered again. This time, Clara stood on the porch by choice. She wore a simple cream dress Mrs. Vale had altered, her hair pinned with a blue ribbon one of the schoolgirls had shyly given her. Her burned hand had healed with faint scars across the fingers. Caleb stood beside her in a dark coat, his hat held against his chest. He had not asked her to marry him in a dramatic speech. That was not his way, and not hers. He had asked one evening, while they were planting winter rye along the bend, "Would you build a home with me where both our ghosts can see daylight?" She had answered, "Yes, but the kitchen will have proper shelves." Now the whole town watched Reverend Cole bless the repaired teacherage. Church bells rang across the prairie, clean and bright in the morning air. Miss Ruth cried openly. Mrs. Avery pretended not to. Amos wiped his eyes with a bandana and claimed smoke from the new stove was drifting. After the prayer, Clara stepped to the door. For a moment, she saw herself as she had been, a terrified orphan cook bursting through smoke, running because no one had ever stood still long enough to stand with her. She remembered ash in her mouth, the deed burning her skin, Voss's voice behind her, and the terrible belief that truth could vanish if she slowed down. Then she felt Caleb's hand at her back, warm and steady. "Ready?" he asked. Clara looked at the road where she had once faced the town alone. Beyond it lay Three Pines, Cottonwood Bend, the creek, the rebuilt barn, and a future neither of them had expected to deserve. She opened the teacherage door wide. Children poured in laughing, lunch pails swinging, boots thumping over new boards. Sunlight spilled across the threshold and touched the framed burned deed on the wall, turning its blackened edges gold. Clara did not run. She stood in the doorway before sunrise had fully left the sky, with her name restored, her home waiting, and the man who had chosen truth beside her. And when Caleb took her hand in front of Mercy Crossing, no one whispered shame. They only heard the bell.